Hello, everybody. Um, I'm Marius Malaia. I'm a network automation solution architect with Telia Carrier. I know it's a big name. I've been doing this for almost a year now. Actually doing this for like half a year. I've been with Telia for about 3 years and in the industry quite a lot, 15 years, I think, already. And with me today is my colleague.
Yeah, I'm Niklas Bogeholm, and I work for the global services and operations part of Telia as a senior system developer working on NSO.
And we're going to obviously talk about our experience with NSO. So let's get started. A bit about us, about Telia. Well, we are in Stockholm, Sweden. I think neither of us is from Stockholm, so I hope this is Stockholm. So probably Telia doesn't need so much introduction here. But what I would like to do is to talk a bit about the markets we span and ask you to think about those markets in an NSO key. How would you use NSO in those markets? So obviously we do mobile, and you can think about here about the whole chain for delivering mobile services from the mobile core with all its mobile components, HSS, HLR, so forth, the mobile backhaul, the radio access network, and all the way on the air to the user. And also think about the breadth of the technologies from almost legacy 2G now, even though that is quite used by some older models and especially M2M. So it's not so legacy, all the way to 5G and IoT. We also sell broadband, as in fixed broadband. And here we have the two flavors for the residential market, which is a mass market, which has some challenges, but due to volume, already employs some level of automation, which is both good and a challenge when you start to do some other automation in parallel with that, and which might turn into some conflict. And we also have the business side of delivering broadband services, which has different challenges where we have basically mass customizations. Like every single customer has some different needs, and depending on the customer side, some different muscle to have those services tailored to their needs. We also do fixed voice. Well, I'm not sure if even NSO can help here, but no, I was just kidding. Actually, we've seen the value of fixed voice, especially in emergency situations where mobile services are affected. We've seen quite a lot of usage for fixed for emergency cases, and also on the business side, they're still used, and especially with having these bots and all kinds of systems to answer the phones and such. TV these days is mostly packet-based. So that means your customers get to view live the quality of your network. Either being it the time it takes to load the video when they press play in their setup box, or scroll through a video, or if being maybe even artifacts from delay and jitter. So TV is a very interesting case, and I think one of the contenders for closed-loop automation. And of course, the carrier services. Carrier, which is always sometimes called, not always, the hidden gem of Telia in some circles, says the carrier employee, is basically, according to Dean's research, the largest backbone out there. With about 53% of the global internet routes originated by carrier customers, which I think that's a big thing. So imagine how you could use NSO into delivering these services. Talking about carrier, some statistics. This is the number of planned works we do since January last year. It's about 700 a month, which I would argue is quite a few, especially for a not so large organization on the carrier side, still under 500 employees. So if you take that in days, that means like, I don't know, 23 per day. If you take out weekends, maybe the customers don't want plain maintenance in a weekend, that is like 23 per day, 33 per day. So that is quite a lot of room to do some errors. And with 700 planned works a month, even if you fail then less than 1%, you still are not good enough, not if you want to have happy customers. So this is something we could do something about in order to improve the success ratio for this planned works. So what are our orchestration ambitions? Well, first and foremost, we put our customers. So thinking about the example with the care planned works, we want reliable operations. So we want to have as much of the changes done with as little error as possible, but basically automated. We want to have a least human intervention in a long list of tasks you need to do pre-maintenance, during maintenance, post-maintenance, and so forth. And basically also cut the plain maintenance shorter by doing automated pre-checks or post-checks and all kind of automation use cases. We also want an effortless customer experience. I mean, we all live in this age where we got accustomed with the big web companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon type of services, where everything is seamlessly delivered to you, being a VM in the cloud, in AWS, or being something like a headphones on Amazon Prime. You're used with this customer, like seamless customer experience. And this is something we want to deliver to our customers as well. An effortless experience in which they get to order and manage their services in an easy and smooth way. Being they want to do that in a web interface, in a customer portal, or maybe APIs. We have customers who are asking for APIs to manage their services, used with the cloud providers, or via the customer care. We still a high percent of customers want to have their service managed through the customer care. So you cannot leave those behind either. What else do we aim to have? Well, fast product development. These great Web 2.0 companies got where they are by being disruptive in the industry where they operate. And they say in the gems, in the boards, that if you don't disrupt your own business, someone else will. And you cannot be disruptive if you have a long time to market, if you have a long time in incubation until you come with the product out. So we want to shorten that time and to, cliche, fail fast on product development. So we want to have a faster way of building these services. What else do we want? Self-healing network. Yes, quite an abstract thing at start, especially if you think about physical network elements. Like how do you self-heal when a device is broken? But when you're starting to think in key of automation and virtual network functions, then you start to see ways of self-healing also a physical network. We'll talk about this in the next slide. So you might say, okay, you had some big, nice goals up there on the screen, but what do you actually do about it? How do you plan to deliver that? So first of all, we want to implement a network abstraction layer. Colin was talking about this in the bottom top approach, where we want basically to iron out vendor differences in a vendor agnostic layer, basically by writing generic device and service models, and building without the network API. Where we could query, send configuration changes, read state, and so forth. So basically have an API for the network. What else we plan to do, and we are doing, is zero-touch fulfillment, which basically is fancy words for automatically deliver services with input validation. And input validation is not easy when you're thinking about flexible order management tools, about having tailored solutions for the customers, with free text being entered in there, and then you want to programmatically understand what the customer wants. So that's not always the easiest thing to do. And then, as part of the zero-touch fulfillment, we also want to do the end-to-end part of it, to enable monitoring, to enable SLA, billing, and so forth. Zero-touch provisioning, well, we already do lots of this, especially where we have mass volume. So we already do CPE, zero-touch provisioning, not with NSO. But we also want to do more. We want to do for the network elements. So we want to do the infrastructure automation part of the picture. And that can have some challenges with different vendors, different models, different software versions, and so forth. Network as an SDK. Yes, this is to answer the fast product development ambition, where SDK is not really a software development, more like a service development kit, where we want, and we're doing modeling of the building blocks of a service, so we could use it like in a Lego to build new services. So some of these building blocks could be, I don't know, in the case of IP services, could be a layer 2 interface, layer 3 interface, static route, BGP neighbor, whatever, and then you just compose them in delivering new services. And closed loop automation for the self-healing network goal, where we have to first consolidate the measurement gathering, which in a large company could be quite spread, everybody doing his own things, and then collect that, understand that in a uniform way, and then after understanding that, computing some corrective measures and having those applied out in the network. And we already started to do some automatic traffic engineering with Cisco Way. And it's yeah, it's looking promising. We do for now RSVP-ET, and we're hoping to do SRT in not so long. Yes, the bigger picture. So where NSO fits in the bigger picture? I know where you're looking. This is the Telia Orchestration Framework, which is a product of our network architecture and SDN team in Telia, who is working to lay the foundations for how to do automation in the greater company. I can give you here an example of a product which we sometimes deliver, and yeah, not so seldom, which spans quite a lot of the organization. So think of a product which is sold in a country, let's say Finland, which spans the national network because the customer has different branches in the country and so forth. They want managed CPEs, they don't want headaches. At the same time, they have offices around the world. And with the carrier network, we can deliver that as well. So we have to automate the delivery of that into the carrier network. And on top of that, they also have to have managed CPEs in the same style as they have in the national network, but internationally. So I'm already thinking about 2-3 NSO instances at least in this picture. And then we need to know how do we orchestrate, how we decompose the service, the business request into service and so forth down to the actual configuration bits. So this is what this framework is trying to do. And where NSO fits, the Cisco NSO in this picture currently is here on the one orchestration and configuration management. It might be doing some more of the network service orchestration, but it currently doesn't. I talked to my colleagues, maybe you name that layer, or maybe you can talk to Cisco to rename NSO, I don't know. It might be easier. Yeah, this is where it fits. It's not excluded to do more, but we'll see. So where have we started? Well, as anybody who's been in a business around, we started with legacy systems, a lot of them, connecting straight into the network elements differently, managing different parts of the configuration, bits of the complete workflow, and sometimes actually doing redundant work because we, as most large companies do, work in silos sometimes, which is, yeah, it's something of a challenge. Silos because we're quite large, we have different companies, different countries, different units who, yeah, work on the same problem and find probably different solutions. We also have previous partial automation efforts. So we have bits of the configuration done automatically. For instance, in the case of carrier, we have an automatic system which updates the prefix list, which we have on the BGP sessions. And that's an interesting one. It's an interesting one for onboarding into NSO as well. A challenge we see there is some of these prefix lists are huge. Some of our big customers have prefix lists of like 40,000 plus prefixes. Now imagine transferring that over a REST API and having a sync from all the time for that device with 45,000 prefixes in just one prefix list. And this, in the big hubs, we have several of these prefix lists in the same equipment. So that's a challenge. And also, when we have the customer changing his prefix list options, this is automatically deployed. So you have to also, how to say, have NSO working in parallel with that until and if we get to move this into NSO. What else we have there? We have, like I said, in some cases, quite flexible order management systems with free text, where the sales or the customer could put whatever you want. I want PFD, I want this BGP password, I want this and that. So we have to put up with those and to transform those or restructure those to be more programmatic, so we could understand what we're trying to deliver. And then we have, at least in the network operation side of fields, we're doing better now, scarce developers' kits. Partially due to the high specialization of the network engineers, very specialized on mobile core, radio access, different industry fields. Also outsourcing, so big telcos buy software, so you don't get to build too much yourself. And yeah, of course, little time to actually do what's fun and develop things. So you have to do what you have to do first, and then you have time for fun. So this is where we started. I will leave to my colleague to present the next few slides, and then we'll come back for the lessons learned together.
Yeah. Okay. So then we move over to from where we started to where we are right now. And if we start with the architecture. We're currently handling service logic north of NSO, in part due to the fairly complex nature of the business logic involved, not muddling down the network with that, and in part sort of out of a desire to gather the full picture of the service before we requisition things from inventory and push that down onto NSO, so we keep that out of the actual time for provisioning. We're handling vendor abstraction as a fairly natural part of NSO. Basically, no system north of NSO should ever need to understand the particulars about the deploying a service on a particular device vendor, be it Cisco or Huawei or whatever it is. It should look the same to them. And from the other end of the spectrum, this also decouples the resource-facing services from service concerns coming down topwards. If you build a resource-facing service that tackles a particular configurational context, you shouldn't need to care about how the Lego blocks are put together. You can just work on your particular end of the problem. We're handling input parameter collection also north of the NSO, partially due to a desire to not alter current processes if there's no particular benefit to automation in doing that. Let's see, what else do we have? Implementation-wise, we've been focusing on the zero-touch fulfillment of IP services, since that's one area that was flagged as where we could save a lot of time from doing this. They're fairly complex. They take a while to get done. We built these various resource-facing services as Lego blocks, as Marius was touching upon earlier, so they can be reused on several customer-facing services if need be. They target network functions, layer 2 interface or BGP neighbor or BGP global and so on. We have a few CFSs that use these Lego blocks. And there's been a ton of work done north of NSO to adapt our older bespoke solutions to be more automation friendly, that is constraining input from text fields to particular types and so on. We have a number of NSO instances in production from the various parts of the country organizations we have, and they're connected to larger parts of the IP network and used to sort of collect inventory data and discover topology and so on. When we have this, what's the next step then? Well, if you go from manual provisioning, even if you're using templates as a base, to fully automated provisioning with a tool, this means your workforce is going to need some retraining. If you work with service development, you're going to need to learn how to use these Lego blocks to express your service. If you work in service assurance, you're going to need to be able to handle topology changes in the network, see how they affect the services, as well as troubleshoot any issues that stem from this if something is missed. You, as a engineer working with provisioning, you're going to have to learn a new interface for what you're working in, and likewise you're going to need to learn to troubleshoot the fringe issues that might get missed when you're deploying a new service. Other than that, I think it's just continued CFS development, both from an expansion standpoint on the services we already have to get more fringe cases into that, and adding new customer-facing services to target more network use cases, and just generally pursuing the journey of end-to-end automation. The end goal over here is nothing short of complete orchestration of the entire workflow, from ordering, potentially through a portal of some sort or over an API, to billing, monitoring, and the work. The more you can automate, the better. So, over to the lessons learned.
Yes. So, what we have learned so far, sometimes the hard way, sometimes we were spot on, so we were happy we were there. So, start simple, greenfield. I've just seen in Hiroko's presentation on entity, they started greenfield. Congratulations. We started brownfield. We started brownfield. I think I have more white hairs now. But this supports the initial learning curve, which is not always the easiest. If any of you have done Ansible before, that is a different learning curve. You don't have models in there, you don't have Young, you just start to do replacement of variables in templates and off you go. So this supports the initial learning curve. This sets the foundation for the new system. So you have to have your system. And maybe in smaller companies it's not such a challenge, but in bigger companies to traverse all the security requirements until you have a system in production, contacting your production network elements with something seen as insecure static passwords and authentication keys and such. That is a lot of, how should I say, ironing out of issues you might have. By starting simple. And it also highlights the potential challenges, not all of them, but some of them. So for instance, something which we discovered quite late was that our authentication system cannot scale to the aggressiveness of NSO logging in into 100 devices at the same time. Because like we wrote, we put in production, okay, connect all networks, synchronize everything, see what's out there. And then, yeah, we've seen like, okay, but half of these devices are failing. And then, yeah, it's permanent error because the authentication was rejected and so forth. So we had to redo the authentication system. Yeah, with all the security requirements and everything, it is not the easiest thing. But it's nice if you discover it fast, early. So there is a lot of value into starting simple. Just set the host name with NSO automatically everywhere. See how that goes. People and processes. This is what's been named before because basically, when you're changing an established process, that's not always welcome. So we did this both good and bad. We involved people, and I advise everybody to involve people whose work is going to be touched by the automation process early on. Ask them, where do you see the most benefit of automation? And in our case, the answer was not in the configuration management. So most of the work is actually north of NSO for aligning all the legacy systems and such. But when you have them involved, when you have people in service development involved that telling them the service has to be changed and such, they are more open about it. So have them involved early. Don't do this thing in a small something somewhere and then ta-da!
Congratulations, you're going to automate tomorrow.
Yes. Clear service definition. I think we've been, beaten by this one a few times, but basically taking years and years of service development and customization and tailoring and try to put that in a clear definition, that's not something easy. I think you shouldn't rush this one through. You should do this properly. We've done it with iterations quite a few times, and we discovered corner cases like, I don't know, this higher MTU value is requested here, or we don't like the way you do BGP prefix, max prefix calculation. Why is it hard-coded? Why are you not reading an apply group? Why, yeah, all kind of things. So you have to have this this done. I think I'm stressing it because it is important. When you do the service orchestration, you have to have the service definition very clear, especially in the brownfield. What more? Project management. Well, since you have to do service orchestration, and like we are aiming to do it end to end. You touch on so many different aspects of the business. You have to follow up with, I don't know, the order management guys to change that field to support this drop down instead of free text. You have to follow up with the NSO delivery guys to support these features and these parameters in this way with this default value and so forth. So project management is important if you're doing it end to end and brownfield and so forth. Support from the management. I mean, this is sometimes easier to get support from the management. What we've seen is harder is to have that support clearly communicating all the way to the bottom, so the people understand. You know, guys, this is happening. That's where we think it's important to have it clearly understood by the whole organization, not just top managers. That there's value to this. Developing in-house. Yes.
Basically, you need to maintain the skills in-house when you're done with it. By all means, employ consultants, reach out to Cisco, get help where you can get it, but make sure you learn something from the process, because if you're going to want to scale this later, when you have a handful of developers, you need someone to be able to teach this to the rest of the organization. Otherwise, you will not be able to scale. That's the
I think
basis
you can
of
take
it.
The next.
Sure.
Yes.
Now here, automated testing. Yeah, this might be natural to the software development folks among you, but for network technicians, this is something entirely new and not a natural thing at all. So basically, start with simple automated tests. Just make sure you test something and later adopt that and push it into what you make, what you turn into your CI/CD pipeline, basically. So start with functional testing, move on to unit testing, and just scale from there. Here's another thing that might be natural to some people, but we had to learn the hard way. Make sure you use natural keying where it's available. It makes the service a whole lot more transparent when you're looking at the entire stack. You can follow it through very easily, rather than if you have some non-organic key somewhere on the way that you just invented because it seemed like a good idea.
But on this one in the audience, how many of you know what natural keying is? Right?
Couple of hands at least. Maybe
yes.
we need
shall we maybe
brief
explain a bit what natural keying is?
Explanation. Natural keying is using something that's already present on a device or something that you have in order to key the storage of your information. So a good example of a natural key would be host name and interface name. That's natural keys. They're already on the devices. It's something that exists. An example of an artificial key would be a subscription identifier that you use instead. A whole lot less transparent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good example. And I think we already touched on this a little bit. There's some help out there. Make sure you use the community hub. There's some good examples there. Even the developer guide has, for NSO has a couple of very good examples. What's slightly lacking might be there could be a little bit more best practice guides, especially on the overall topic. How do you tie these things together and make something out of it? There's lots for the various small use cases, but a little bit hard to find information about tying this together in the best possible way.
Yeah, there's more than this, but we had to keep it in 30 minutes and 20 seconds. So, but I think we have good time for questions if there are questions out there. Please.
How do you keep your service model secure? So basically, a developer creates a service that is able to destroy the entire network. You can test it, okay, but do you have some certification method for deployed for that?
Basically, the bottom layer of services is built out of network functionality, and they're intended to be reused by the top layer of services. And we don't just let anyone consume one of those. We have in-house teams that are assigned with using the Lego blocks that we provide in order to deliver the services that get requested by the rest of the organization.
So not anybody can develop an RFS and put it in. And we have also user acceptance testing. So before putting something into production, we test this both with dummy NetSIMs and also with real devices before actually taking it from staging to prod.
Then there's also the more programmatic culture of having code reviews before you actually push something somewhere. So if a team as part of Telia wants to have something into an NSO production instance, we look over it first and see that this is sane, this adheres to the principles we want to build with.
Can you tell a little bit more about how you integrate with your BSS system? What kind of interface you use?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm having trouble finding you. Where are you in the audience? Over there. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. I'm doing parts of that work. So we actually built a service orchestration software piece on top of NSO, which interfaces with the BSS, with the resource allocation, builds a context of the service we're about to push down to NSO. We had to do quite a bit of changes in all this. For instance, we're lacking API interfacing in some of the inventories and such. So we had to build even more components in order to take out from the inventory with directly reading a database and then doing the API and such. So basically, we had to develop a service orchestration layer on top of NSO, which does this integration and translates a work order into an actual NSO parameters and then pushes that. We also have a confirmation interface, so the IP config operators get to see, they receive in their queue, they receive a work order that a service is ready to be pushed down to the network, and with a single click they get to see the diff, the output of the commit dry run, and they get to see that in a window, and they get to see the changes, and they can get to approve or reject it on spot. And each of them will do different things. One will finish the deployment and do some more post-configuration, monitoring and such, and another one will create another work order for them to see why it failed.
This is actually a good example of how you generate acceptance within your workforce for the automation system. Just going out full automated to begin with day one might not be a good idea, but allowing them to validate the automation so they can get comfortable with it and see that this actually does what is intended will allow them to embrace it on a whole other level.
Also, how do you monitor the services from BSS, or is it done already?
There is some monitoring at least for the NSO installations for the NSO service, and the other components which we have north of NSO, they are developed in a DevOps type of style. So the devs themselves, they create how we call it, health point checks, which are verified that the actual functionality of that component is working. So that's part of a DevOps part of thing. And while the actual production systems and servers are monitored by your colleagues in GSO.
Standard monitoring
and
software.
Standard monitoring, because we have everything is in virtualized environment in a telco cloud.
Yeah, in the NSO case. And for the services themselves, they are monitored by the system we use for service monitoring today. I'm not entirely sure which one that is. It's not my part of it.
So I have a follow-up then, because Calvin actually stole my question there. No, that's okay. That's great. So, I mean, you mentioned on one slide there was this closed automation, right?
Yes,
I think the closed loop
automation.
Yes.
But yet, throughout, you kind of got the feeling that was, configuration management and then automated provisioning. You had a lot of focus on configuration, and so now you mentioned that there's this other monitoring system, right, that actually monitors things, collects state from the network. How do you create the closed loop?
Well, it's still open.
Okay. The question on the closed loop is open.
Yeah. At least for the remediation of infrastructure, as you might taken from our presentation, we focused on the service, on the zero-touch fulfillment, on the service delivery part. We didn't focus so much on the infrastructure automation right now. This is where we started because management style asked, what's the best value for the business? And the business says, okay, then delivering the services in an automated way. They don't see directly the value of automating the bottom on the network operations. So on this is open, but on the automatic traffic engineering, it's a bit of a parallel thing, and there are some parallel efforts to close the loop with
for the generation of service we're looking at now. We're looking at a bit of a closer integration towards inventory and more of an infrastructure type service that puts the premises in place in order to be able to actually provision the customer services. So we're looking at that right now.
State monitoring of the services and such.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Java, Python, templates, or a mix, and why?
A mix, because varying degrees of knowledge with varying developers. We're using primarily Python and templates, service logic in Python, templates small and modular, at least for the resource-facing services. And on the customer-facing services, they might be more use case-oriented.
Yeah, Java where the professional steps in. There is some Java as well. Yeah.
We have some for some database drivers and various things that are written in Java towards the bottom of the stack as well.
Yes. Any more questions?
Hello? Oh, yeah, it works. So you've also mentioned network as an SDK, though I think I understand the concept. That is actually what our team is trying to build as well. But could you please elaborate a bit? What does it mean from your perspective in your particular case, and what tools did you use for this? Thanks.
Well, basically, this is accomplished pretty much entirely through NSO. The thinking is we have a multi-layered service architecture where we have one CFS might utilize several configuration-driven RFS components that are built small and modular, and the top end of these RFS components are built in an entirely device-agnostic way. So basically, the top half of the RFS, it doesn't matter what device it is. On the bottom half of templating, this might split down to device-specific modular templates.
So basically, the service developers, which usually were writing actual templates and testing that configuration on different devices before producing the templates, they actually have to write a CFS with the YANG, the template, the Python logic, and everything. So that's where the SDK layer is between the RFSs and the CFSs. Yes?
So you still have operators making out-of-band changes on the same devices where NSO services are being deployed, right? Yes. So how do you manage device sync state? Like specifically, when your users see that dry run, how can they be confident that between the time they look at that and verify that it looks okay and then click commit, that someone hasn't changed the device state out from under them, and that maybe now the dry run would actually, what's being committed is different than what they viewed on the dry run screen, for example?
Yeah, we've been diving into that quite a bit. We asked Cisco. What we ended up with was doing the commits with no overwrite and doing partial syncs. So basically, it's also a bit of optimistic push. So if it fails, we'll see why. But there shouldn't be so long time between the dry run being done and the service being actually pushed out. And actually, this is a temporary stage. So we just use that in order to gain confidence in what we've done and to gain acceptance. But this step of approving or rejecting the dry run is temporary. We aim to completely remove it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Then I think we have a couple of
yeah, we have two
Menti.
Menti questions. So
Yes,
yeah,
yes, we
please
have a
switch
couple
over
of
to
We
that.
have some questions for the audience as well.
Yes. So where are you in your journey towards automation? You can read on your mobile the smaller text. It will be more visible. So going all the way from we're there with the first one, all the way to yeah, we're just starting. Where are you on this scale?
Make sure that you have the right session ID. It's 57 58 81. So
Oh, it's a new one.
it's a new session for the different presentations. Yeah.
Yes.
Participate as
So
well.
yeah, we've seen some 200 plus responses before. So now so far we have 10. Where are you?
I'd say we're somewhere around here.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, very interesting results, but
Matches fairly well with what we saw of developer experience and so on. People are on different parts of this journey.
it's interesting that quite a few are on a different use case.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So they're not doing network administration through device templates. They're not building up services. They're not doing hierarchical service development. But they have a different use case, and that's interesting. It's probably part of the orchestrator of the orchestrators. I don't know if some of you want to comment on that.
Any volunteers? Check the neither replies box.
Yeah. Anybody who voted for the last one would like to share his use case? Not really. Okay.
Yeah. Fine
Not
enough.
really. They just closed those. All right. Still having votes coming in. We can wait a bit. Yes. All right. So you could see that most of the people are getting started with NSO. Quite a number are becoming experienced, and quite a number are also, there. They just come here to share. Yes. Yes, I think we have 2 until 150.
That's good enough. Maybe everyone doesn't wanna.
Yes. And how was your journey so far to implementing automation? Yes. That is interesting. So free actually had nothing but smooth sailing. Was that you, Colin?
That's the Cisco internal ones.
Yes. But yeah, it's very interesting. So yeah, this gives some insight into how easy it is to onboard NSO. Hint for those best practices, this dummy framework things, start here, click next. Yes. All right, we're closing in the number of the previous responders. But this concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.